If I had $1 for every founder who said, all I need to do is fix my pitch deck, I'd be on an island somewhere. Venture is not for every founder, and not all money is good money. There's no exact path or perfect book on raising. They didn't teach me that in entrepreneurship either. When you refine that language, you're going to realize that it made you think about the business differently from the way you currently pitch it. She finally gave in. She has a total now of $155,000 in non-dilutive funding. I was under contract for my first business 4 times, and the third time fell through the week of my wedding. You're not going to go implement every single bit of feedback you hear. You will drive yourself crazy.
Welcome to The Diligent Observer, where we help angel investors see what most miss. I'm your host, Andrew, and every week we explore what works, what doesn't, and why through conversations with experienced startup investors and operators. My guest today is Kat Weaver, serial entrepreneur and founder of Power to Pitch, where she's helped early-stage founders raise over $50 million in capital. After winning 22 out of 23 pitch competitions that she entered with her own startup, Kat discovered that most founders don't fail because of bad ideas. They fail because they can't effectively communicate the value of those ideas. In this episode, we explore the communication gaps that kill deals, why founders should pursue creative financing before going the VC route, and what founders really think about angel investors behind closed doors. I hope you enjoy learning from Kat as much as I did. Kat, thanks for being with me today.
I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so Kat, what are you most excited about right now?
Okay, so we just crossed the over 50 million raised in capital from our founders, which has been super incredible. And I'm gearing up. I'm most excited because my next personal milestone, and for the community, obviously our founders, is 100 million raised. So I'm more than halfway there.
And how many founders is that are underneath that?
No, I'd have to go check. Honestly, I'd be making that number up
Okay.
if I know it. But we just had 480K close from one founder and a 15K angel check this morning. It's hard to keep track of, which is a good problem. But I wouldn't be able to know that number off the top of my head, honestly.
That's okay. I love the focus on knowing what the most important numbers are for you and for the business. And that is one of those is capital raised. So Kat, maybe walk me through kind of the founding story for what you're doing. I've seen you present on a number of occasions and I see your content all over LinkedIn. Give me the story on how you got to this seed, and then I'd love to ask you a few questions.
Of course. So I like to say I'm a 2-time accidental founder. Started my first company in college, no network, thought I was going to go into medicine. And I had people knocking on my dorm door for this consumer product, a wearable wrist wallet that I had created. Then it kind of took off in a small way, right? In an exciting enough way where I switched my major, but then shortly after starting the business, I had lost everything to a fire and I was back to zero. Had nothing, no family money. I was playing tennis in college, and so that was my job. And then I had a professor say you should do a pitch competition. I had no idea what that meant, but that ended up being one of the biggest inflection points for me because that first pitch I did, I won $7,500 to kickstart the business. And I did 21 more. So my claim to fame is winning 22 or 23 pitches I applied for. So I realized there was a system to it. It was not an accident. It was something that once I got that communication down, it worked over and over and over again. And so I started helping founders on the side because I realized, I saw these other amazing entrepreneurs and businesses, but they weren't getting capital because the business was bad. It was because their communication was awful. And so after 6 years, I'd used that funding. It was 6 figures in free capital, actually. I used it to scale and exit, and I wanted to help founders better communicate to raise funding. And so that's what Power to Pitch was born out of. And to date, we're over 50 million raised. As I had mentioned, we have 2 core programs, one for grants and non-dilutive funding, and another for getting investor ready for pre-seed through Series A capital.
Amazing. Well, I know that is something that has been so meaningful to so many founders because I've been in just a few of those conversations with some of the founders that have been through your program, and they just speak so highly of the rigor with which you force them to think through how they're communicating their business. I wonder, what are some of the common themes or the common challenge areas that you just see over and over with a founder who has a real business or a real idea, a real thing that they're working on, but is just struggling to communicate it in the right way? What are the common kind of roadblocks that you see?
Okay, so if I had $1 for every founder who said, All I need to do is fix my pitch deck, or will you just look quickly at my pitch deck thinking that it's going to be some magic bullet to solve all their fundraising problems and it's going to unlock every check? I'd be on an island somewhere. And I think so many founders put this focus on this pitch deck like it is going to be this magic bullet, when in reality, it's nothing to do with the pitch deck. It is everything to do, especially at the early stages, with the founder themselves and how they're communicating. And I would be doing them a disservice if I just looked at their pitch deck, because I have no idea how they're actually communicating in a conversation. And so I'm constantly, right, every day educating founders of like, that's not actually going to help you. It's not the reason. Here's what to think about instead, what to focus on. And you talked a little bit about the rigor. And this is why I vet every founder in our program, is because it is hard work. Venture is not for every founder, and not all money is good money. I want to make sure that a founder is going to be coachable in the sense of, I'm not going to touch their pitch deck until I see their pitch. That is first and foremost. And I would say the second thing is, so many founders see the title of someone that says investor on LinkedIn or whatever platform, and they do automatic outreach. I'm raising, here's my deck, here's all these things, let's chat. And they don't do the research if that investor is going to be strategic for them, or if they even invest in their stage or in their industry. And I see founders get desperate and are more lazy. And those are some of the core things. I mean, we could be here all day talking about those, but those are the really, really big pieces that I see on a daily basis.
It sounds like a lot of your initial work is just helping provide basic education for founders on how this ecosystem works, how they fit, how to think about raising from investors or from grant funding organizations. Let's say someone is in your program, they are a good fit. This is a startup. This has some kind of legs to it. Once they're at that stage, what are some of the major over and over and over again challenge areas for founders as they are doing their best to reorient?
That's a great question. And it's not a one size fits all. I will say, I don't think founders, even at that stage, consider all of their financing options. You see this TechCrunch and Forbes article, and it's like, oh, I got to go the venture route, or I'm going to take on angel investors. I always recommend a combination of capital, no matter the stage, from calling it like customer financing, pre-sales, all the things before you're ready. And then you've got various forms of debt. Debt is cheaper than equity. And I think it's a red flag when a founder doesn't want to consider alternative options, or even they're in the consumer product space and they haven't considered inventory or PO financing. You're going to give up a lot more equity on your cap table versus thinking about some other creative options and lowering the amount that you're giving up, even from like, the credit card route is not for everyone, but it's like, if you can leverage little bits here and there to get over some humps instead of waiting on capital, the grant route, if you're under $1 million ARR, there's so many things that I even in like some of the other investors that I know, I say, ask about these options, suggest them to the founders, because it's not natural to know all these things. It's not super clear. There's no exact path or perfect book on raising. They didn't teach me that in entrepreneurship either. Like, I just had to figure it out and hack my way through the system and share that with others. So I get that it's not natural, but I always say like a combination of capital, no matter that stage, is something like going the creative financing route is more realistic than just going pure venture.
I love this concept of creative financing. It's so common to see a founder that's applying to an angel group or sitting down for coffee and they've not raised any capital yet. They have no outside financing. And their response when asked why, what I've heard commonly, I'd be curious to hear how often you hear this, is, oh, well, I'm too early for traditional financing. None of those other options are available to me yet. How often do you hear that, and where do you point people to start? Maybe the grant route, pitch competitions, probably one of your favorites.
Yeah. And well, I asked, like, why haven't you started a waitlist or pre-sales? That's first and foremost. Before you do anything else, what's your hesitation? What is your problem with perfection? Usually is what we're like trying to unpack in there. And then the second is, I love corporate grants. So government grants are a very different beast. They are typically a lot more money, but it's more of like a credit system. There's a lot more strings attached. It takes quite a bit longer. And I know a friend who secured a $5 million government grant and regretted it because he had to hire 3 people just to manage the process and hopefully get paid out 8 months later when they submit, for reimbursement and all that kind of stuff. So I love the corporate grant route for founders under $1 million and it's not like consistent reoccurring capital, but it's meant to be a small cash boost. It's not a loan. You don't pay it back. It is pure cash in the mail. A pure grant is. And it also comes with PR, credibility, potential mentorship, don't have to give up any equity. Even the past month, we had 3 founders win some smaller grants, and they had been trying to raise for over a year with no luck. They secure this grant. It got them over this little bit of a hump, got them some PR, another advisor, and then use that to end up successfully completing their full raise. And so that becomes a little bit of a boost in so many ways. And I hear all the time, it's like, I don't have time for that, or they're only for nonprofits, or, it's not worth it. I'm going to get rejected. They're too competitive. None of that is true. Actually, in our grant program, we share 200 plus grants every single month. There are so many out there. I had someone win 25K yesterday morning who had never won anything before. And so there's a system to it, but I would say if you're not at least trying it, you're missing out, because there's so much more that can come from it outside of just a pure cash basis. And I'm a living testimonial of that.
So speaking from maybe looking from the investor's perspective, we're co-investing alongside a lot of this kind of capital from these different grant organizations. Maybe give a quick primer for, let's say I've been angel investing for a year. I'm in a few deals, looking for a few more, getting a little smarter. Explain to me the corporate grant process at a high level. Like, who starts these? What are they motivated by? Where do they land? Like, how does it work? And maybe differentiate that a little bit more clearly from the government grant, which is often a little bit flashier, bigger dollars a lot of the time. It has these interesting performance elements attached to it.
Sure. I break this down really in depth on my YouTube channel at Cat Weaver, but at a high level, organizations like FedEx, Verizon, we had a founder win $50,000 from Progressive last year. Others, they get tax incentives. It is also PR for them. They drum a ton of business and insight and data from these types of applications. And then a year from now, they want to do PR on you and brag about you of how much they impacted you in the business. And so it's a win-win for everyone around. They want someone who will represent them well. Of course, that makes sense. And the check sizes on average are between 1,000 to 200,000 even plus. I will say it probably rounds out around the 10 to 25K that come a bit quicker. You can get paid out in a month or less. Sometimes it's a few months, but that's still quicker than the government cycle, which might take a year or two.
Sure.
There's grants for every industry in the corporate world, practically, from I'm an idea to all the way of like something super niche. Your local chamber of commerce has them, like you name it. I haven't not seen an industry represented. And then on the government side, I typically see it's more health oriented, government defense, super deep tech, things like that. So it's not as supportive from an industry perspective. And then even on the corporate grant side, like lifestyle businesses, some smaller folks, and on the government side, you typically have to be a little bit more developed. And I think that on the corporate side too, the expectations are, oh, it's going to take too long, or I need a professional. It can take anywhere from an hour to 2 hours doing it right and batch applying. So it's so doable. There's absolutely no excuse for a founder to not set aside 1 or 2 hours bi-weekly even to be able to secure and get enough insight from that. And I always say an opportunity to pitch is never one wasted, because on the corporate grant side, you can ask for feedback. And it's helping you organize categories of the business, where the government grant, that application is going to take you days, and you're going to pay someone to do that for you, maybe even 2 people. Corporate grant is so simple, and they all ask the same core questions. Your story, what are you going to do with the money, your competition. So it does become a copy and paste process.
It's funny, as you're talking, Kat, I'm reminded of my college application days and the scholarship process. This feels like the same thing, but in a totally different space. Is that a fair comparison? Where would you disagree with that?
I mean, to sit down and like write something out, sure, but it's not one long pitch. It's like, all right, you have 100 characters to give us your story. Then you have another 100 characters to tell us your target market and your competition. And they purposely keep it short, maybe anywhere from a few questions up to 10, 20, or 30. And you're answering it in piecemeal. So it's not something super structured, but they really want like the story and that essence and that energy from a founder versus something super curated. Like they can tell if you're using AI and it sounds so scripted. They want that like scrappy founder, because they want to fuel that again and give you that little taste to kind of get to that next level. That's what it's meant for. That's how I'd sum that up. The beauty is that that language transcends across sales. Be pitching retailers on your website. When you refine that language, you're going to realize that it made you think about the business differently from the way you currently pitch it. And that's one of my favorite exercises, why I say don't go hire someone to do that, because you need to do that work to become a better founder and a better communicator. And I'll give you one example. We had one founder, she used the same core pitch. So a core of building out for a copy and paste is really like a 5 to 7 minute investor pitch structure. You can break all those core categories out and paste them into the majority of these questions. And she was kind of fighting us on this because she was one of those of like, I just want to send you my pitch deck. And I'm like, not going to happen because I can't help you with that. And I'm not the right fit if you're not going to let me look at that language. She finally gave in and she won 3 grants totaling $90,000. Huge PR. She's gone on to win. She has a total now of $155,000 in non-dilutive funding. And I would say that 155K is a bit above average, but from the same pitch format. So it's like another great example. And we had one founder, 4 grants, $63,000 in all of that. The same core pieces, just maybe moving a couple words, making sure you fit within the character or word counts, that easy.
So if I'm an angel, I should really be expecting to see some non-zero amount of non-dilutive funding on just about every founder's story. If there is none of this, my question, which you pointed to earlier, is why not? What have you done to engage these free or low-cost sources of capital?
I would say it's not a requirement. I don't think they're a lesser founder if they haven't tried it. A lot don't know about it. But I would say that if they're in the really early stages, like pre-sales, they're under 10K MRR especially, and they haven't thought about alternative options versus just going the investor route, and they're probably a little desperate at that point. That's why they're doing it. They're not as profitable. It's something to advise upon or ask. But again, it's not super common. It's why I do what I do, because the majority of founders I meet are like, I didn't even know that was an option. I had no idea about that. So I wouldn't use it as a judgment marker. I would use it as an educational tool and a guide to really figure out maybe where some of their weak points are, of like, why go the investor route when you could get something a little bit cheaper, and push them on that to make sure that it's a good fit.
Well, it sounds like even, hey, go through the process, fill out 50 grant applications, then come back. Let's hear your pitch again.
Fill out 5, it'll change your language. Fill out 10, oh my gosh, we're in another dimension. It doesn't even need to be 50.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like the bigger value here that I see as an investor is in the refinement of the vision, because what you're working them through is this capacity to articulate the vision for the organization in a concise, compelling way, which is exactly what they need to be able to recruit and sell longer term, that's the job as a founder. So I love this. I think that's a hack that I'm for sure going to add to my back pocket. Okay, I want to talk a little more about the equity fundraising side. We talked a little bit about grants and different avenues there. I'm really curious to hear about the things that you hear founders talk about behind closed doors. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I see you as like the fundraising therapist for a lot of founders. Like you're working, founders are going and pitching, they're applying, they're talking to investors, then they're coming back to you going, oh my gosh, this went great, or holy moly, this was horrible, here's where I screwed up. Unpack for me and for our listeners, like, what are some of the things that you hear founders share with you in that sacred space that angel investors just don't understand or don't seem to be getting the memo on? Like, what are the things that they complain about from angels again and again and again, that if you had a mic and you could talk to every angel investor in the world, you would tell them about?
Okay, I'm so glad you asked me this question. This is a really good one. I think the first point of heartbreak is being ghosted. Like at least not getting a no. And the next level is giving them a little bit of a why. But when a founder gets ghosted, I see them go into a literal spiral. Like it is the most personal thing, like a personal attack in a way of like, what did I do wrong? What happened? This. And sometimes we're busy. We're seeing a lot of deals. That happens. But it's the ghosting that really freaks people out. Because I tell founders they're lucky if they got a no. You got a direct answer. And I will say, if it's a no, is it a no, not right now? Come back to me when you have X, Y, and Z KPI. Or is it a no, I don't even invest in this industry. I don't know why you bothered to pitch me in the first place. I think that will save both sides time. And I know it's a lot of emails, but like the right founder should also be emailing you maybe 5 times trying to get an answer. So if you don't want that to happen, give them a no. And then the next frustration point would be not getting feedback. Like, oh, I pitched them and I didn't hear, or they said no. It's like, I would have loved a little bit of insight as to what turned them off. or maybe what I can do better. And it doesn't mean that they're going to take that piece of advice, because what I tell founders is you're not going to go implement every single bit of feedback you hear. You will drive yourself crazy. You log that feedback. And when you hear the same thing 2 to 3 times at a minimum, then you go implement those changes. And you see the themes of like, I'm getting feedback on my 3-year projections, or my competitive analysis sucks, or whatever it is. But if someone makes one tiny comment, yeah, again, you're not seeing enough people to get insight on that, and you're going to go nuts. So those are the 2 biggest factors I hear. And it comes in a few different forms, but like that's it.
That's so funny because it's just it feels like, right? We're here talking and it feels like such a low lift for an investor to be direct and to give a response, but
They're busy too.
right, seeing the lives and knowing these angels, it's so often not intentional. It's purely, now that's not always the case. Sometimes it is. I don't want to own up and make a hard decision. Just get busy, get distracted, forget something else is more pressing. But investors, operators, anybody listening to this, one of the kindest things you can do for every founder that interacts with your organization is just give a clear response.
And I know some funds, so internally they have a pass and track, as in we're passing, but we want to secretly watch them. Pass and no, as in we're absolutely not a fit. And then obviously, like, yes, the deal, we're going into further diligence, but if it's pass and track, tell them what you want to see.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to motivate the founder. And then you can tell if they're coachable. And when they come back to you, like, did they actually listen? What did they learn, achieve? It's a win on both sides.
So you mentioned another strategy, which I love, about processing investor feedback, of making sure you get 2, 3 plus situations where you're getting the same piece of feedback. What are the themes that you hear from investors giving feedback to entrepreneurs that's just like horrible advice? Because I know there's a lot out there, and I have a lot of pet peeves about other investors giving horrible advice, but what are some of the themes you hear a lot from founders?
Female founders have it the worst. I have a running list of actually some of the ridiculous things that investors have asked or said, female founders, and they're all anonymous. But from, when do you plan to have kids? I hope you don't have more kids. What does your husband think about this? The berating around the capability of the female founder still happens in 2025. That is so much more common than you think. And it's really, really unfortunate. I've even had people tell me, oh, your content is only working because you're cute, to my face. And I'm like, well, I've helped founders do X, Y, and Z. It actually has nothing to do with that. I take my work very seriously. And I've been given these comments, and that guy means absolutely nothing to me. I want nothing to do with him, and it is what it is. But it's just unfortunate and shocking that some people feel comfortable saying what they say to female founders. I will say too, is I've seen some investors get really aggressive on wanting to change a founder's business model, instead of it being a conversation of like, have you thought about this in this way, versus I'm not investing if you don't do this. And the founder's like, that wasn't even on our strategy plan. That doesn't mean that both sides is like maybe right or wrong, but it should be more of a collaborative conversation, not some strong arm opportunity, because out of respect for the founder and what they're doing, I would say too. And hopefully that founder is not desperate enough to take a check like that from someone wanting to be stronger than them, but I do see it happen. So that is one. And the third I would say is from non-experienced angel investors. One of my founders in the program, she's really regretting accepting a big check from this guy years ago. And he calls her, forcing her to do certain product launches, telling her he just wants his money back. She needs to exit sooner. She needs to be bought out. And she's like, I can't get this guy off my back. I'm trying to buy him out. It's more expensive. And he wasn't a strategic fit for her cap table to begin with. And that was on her, and she needed the money, and she made a judgment call that wasn't the right one at the time. But those, in terms of that kind of force, is something that no one wants to have to deal with at the end of the day.
So on that point, maybe just to double click a little bit further, we talk a lot on the show about the difference between smart money and dumb money, and how every investor ought to strive to only participate when they can actually serve as smart money, and that they really should only be given opportunities to invest in opportunities where they can serve as smart money. Walk me through your framework of how you encourage your founders to make this assessment for themselves as they're getting to know a potential investor. The best founders, the most compelling opportunities, I believe, have their pick of the litter in terms of investors. And so the investor needs to win their right to be able to deploy those dollars. Walk me through your framework for how you help founders evaluate, is this prospective investor a fit?
So I actually just brought on a new founder 2 hours ago because they had never thought about what an ideal investor profile looked like. They said, we'd never heard of that. You're just pitching for any type of capital. And what we talked through was, I believe every single founder, and I have a whole document in my program of what and how to build out an ideal investor profile in terms of stage, industry, who's in their portfolio that you want a connection to, who can they make introductions for. They don't have to be a user of the product, but like what areas, what buckets do you want value in? Supply chain, marketing, retail, enterprise, whatever it is, actually like list those things. And if someone can't bring one of those to the table, you got to filter them out. Mm. And like you said, like I say, not all money is good money, right? Money is abundant, but the right money, that's a different story. And so building out that filter is so key, because then now as the founder, you hold the keys and you're going to do outreach differently. Like I met a founder who was paid for a 15,000 person investor email list and sent the same email blast to all of them. And shocking, not one replied.
Oh no.
You know what I mean? It's like, I thought that's obvious to me, but clearly it wasn't obvious to them. And so building out that kind of filter. And I also advise against founders, I get offered equity a lot. And I don't think that's a good thing because they didn't do any diligence on me. We even had one call. I'm getting DM'd giving me equity for something that is unrelated to me. And so if a founder approaches you and you're like, oh, I want equity and this and that and all these things, or maybe a little bit of cash or whatever it is, a combination, that should be a huge red flag if they didn't try to diligence you first in that sense. And, you know, I'd rather have 100K from someone super strategic, even 50K, than someone who's not at 250K. And the last thing I'll add around this is I see a lot of founders try to do some like barter for services or agencies of like giving up equity, a lower retainer, some cash. And I think that model is really dangerous because if you can outgrow an agency that fast, they're dead weight on your cap table. And so even like as an angel, when you look at a founder's cap table, who is active, who's like serving like resources and has actual capabilities here versus who's dead weight. And that's going to tell you a lot about the founder and what they're willing to give up and how easy they can be coerced into something or haven't done their research.
I've seen that so many times because it's so easy, right? It's like all you have at the beginning is an idea, a whole lot of dreams, and this precious little equity pool. And you're like, oh, okay, I can leverage
Only
this
so many
asset.
slices of pie available.
Man, that pie gets sliced up really, really fast as you take that approach. I'm curious, Kat, like, I don't know, I just think you're such a fascinating perspective because I mean, helping so many founders raise 50 million, you've seen so many rounds, plus having been a founder yourself and winning all these pitch competitions. If you're sitting in the angel investor seat, what are some of the things you're poking at or asking about that maybe the average angel wouldn't think to poke at? Like, given that perspective, given your experience, like what are some of the things that you think are uniquely important that maybe you feel like the rest of the ecosystem doesn't give enough credit to or pay enough attention to?
So my husband and I had visited a company yesterday to potentially personally angel invest. And I had asked about the company's IP for their software. And they gave us some BS roundabout answer, an analogy that had nothing to do with their IP. So I asked them again, have you protected your IP? Another roundabout answer. And I look at there's two guys there, and I look at the other one and I was like, so that means you don't actually have your IP protected. And he looks at me, he goes, no. So when a founder is trying to dance around the answer and can't give me something direct and is trying to hide that in a way, or think that he's made some fun statement to like push me out of getting the actual answer, huge red flag. To me, like my eyes glaze over half the rest of the meeting. So I'm like, what else are they lying about? What else are they trying to finagle? Because that is what you're investing in and becomes actually valuable. So that was a huge red flag. And then the second is you're due diligencing a founder, right, in this process to invest. But if the founder hasn't made an effort to diligence you, ask you questions, and make sure that you're a right fit, another red flag.
Mm.
So it's not just like, oh, about what you're doing. It's what lens are you taking that like the founder is doing and how responsive they are. Don't give me any work. If you want my money, if you want to figure it out, you got to be the one putting in all the effort and sending me details, updates, expectations. I also thought it was a red flag. So when I was looking at this deal in particular, their data room was one of the worst I'd ever seen. It was so minimal, so unorganized, not even a pro forma, no projections. And their excuse was, oh, we haven't touched that in over a year. And I'm like, you're claiming you're going to have this $9 million plus contract and you're spending all this money and you haven't even mapped out what that's going to cost or what that's going to look like. I left that and I was like, I can't imagine investing in this company because of the disorganization and the lack of focus. And I know we're wearing all the hats. Like I give them credit to like, man, it's like drinking from a fire hose, when you're building and raising at the same time, but huge red flags there.
Makes sense. I would imagine, given that your whole business is about equipping founders to raise well and helping them think through how to present information and get organized, get structured. I would imagine you have a very high bar for expectations on what gets talked about, how it gets presented and communicated in a prospective investment conversation.
Honestly, I don't have a super high bar for that because, not everyone can afford or like goes that route to get it kind of professionally cleaned up or in that right structure. I index heavily first on the founder and their ability. Like if I feel that they're going to be gritty, coachable, transparent, passionate, like they're those qualities, they've already got one big check in my book. Like, are they going to do right by my money? And I mean, I personally have to use like the product to know how to support it. And in that sense, that's everything that I've invested in. I also love former athletes. So myself, I think they know how to sacrifice things a little bit differently. So actually, two of, if not, that could be the third, but for sure, two of my angel investments have been former athletes. And I just think they hustle differently. So it's not a pure requirement, but I'll index a little bit differently based on that. So yeah, I'm not going to judge of like, oh, they've got this perfect pitch and deck and all that. It's what's the effort? What are they willing to sacrifice? And what do they want from me? And if they can do those three core buckets, we're in the next stages essentially.
Interesting. I'm surprised to hear that because I would think in your shoes, I'd be like, oh no, it has to meet my super high criteria. But I love the thoughtfulness and the way that you're leading with the founder first component. I think that's super generous and fits the spirit of angel investing, which is you can have all the best projections and data and it all makes sense on paper. And if I have a bad feeling about you, I'm out, and that's a right call because this is a very intimate form of investing. Or vice versa, you could have all the wrong stuff over here and this is messed up, but if I like believe in this person, then it could be a great partnership and it's probably a fit.
Totally.
So maybe tell me a little more about what does the future hold for you, for the business, for the ecosystem? Like what are the things that, let's say you have a blank canvas, it's 5 years from now, what does the world look like that's different as a result of what you're doing now?
Well, it'll be well past the 100 million range, that's for sure. Two is I've been working on our own internal software, which I'm really excited about. Third is I'm definitely going to write a book. I don't know what it's going to be, probably around this space, and I have some crazy stories. I was under contract for my first business 4 times, and the third time fell through the week of my wedding. Waiting from losing everything here, like you name it. I've probably experienced it, and I'm tougher because of it. But man, in the moment, it felt a little like it was over,
Okay, well, but can we hear the story now, or do we have to wait for the book? Because that sounds horrible, but I'd love to hear the story.
Well, probably parts will be in the book, but at a very high level, like I had a beautiful all cash deal for my company. We literally was supposed to close that week, and I was already prepping to move that inventory out. I was going to be on my honeymoon, and another one of their businesses went under and claimed they needed that cash to bring the business back to life and all this, whatever they could have made something of. I don't know. That feeling of like, I'm about to have a rehearsal dinner in a few days and leave on Monday. What is happening? That was a soul searching moment if I've ever had one. So, and then I had a mentor who is no longer a mentor say, you should sell your company for $1 just to say you sold it. And that fire
What?
inside me, like you would not believe. It
Add
was
that to the list of worst investor advice.
right. It was almost a year later that I finally ended up selling. Like I held on to it and struggled for a bit, but it was worth it. And can't believe all the mentors and advice you hear. I had another, you'll love this, who said, a few years from now, I better not see you as the pitch girl. You don't always want to be known as the pitch girl. You could do great in corporate. And I never talked to that person ever again. I am the glorified pitch girl and I am damn good at it. And I have made a lot of impact. I have no shame around it. And so I think some people take, as some investors or mentors, very literally. And I'm grateful that I was able to take this other lens of that doesn't sit right for me.
Mhm.
I appreciate your time and what you have to say, but not really. So thank you. And I'll never see you again.
I feel like as investors, it's so easy to feel like the power lives with you as a capital provider. And yes, the capital is valuable and there is for sure power there. But I feel like it's so easy to forget that the reason we're investing is that these founders and the companies that they're building are the real value. Like we wouldn't be investing here if we didn't believe that each of these opportunities could go to the moon. Right. Like the power in this, the value in this ecosystem is in the founder and the businesses that they're building. And it stresses me out so much when I hear stories like this of investors thinking they have more power than they actually do without truly stewarding what is the most unique and valuable resource in that room, which is the person that they're speaking to and the businesses and the communities that founder is building and cultivating as a result of their work. Like that is the value creation in this whole picture. And we can never forget that as investors. So I hate that that happened to you, but I am so glad that you have continued on and are
What do you
giving
mean?
back.
I'm glad. It made me so much stronger. And knowing it to say, like, I beat those idiots
Mm.
and everyone else is capable of doing it too. So in the moment, I absolutely did not feel like that. But because it happened, I am so much better for it. And I'm so grateful that they came across my path because that experience you can't pay for.
Mm. I love it. Well, anything else? What else?
More capital raised. I would say like I've always dreamt of making some sort of pitch standard more available to founders, like Y Combinator has given the SAFE, and Founders Institute has given the FAST agreement for advisors, and some of these standards. But you can Google all these pitch standards, but what if there was a pitch standard recognized by other investment groups in terms of pitching, and that education was more accessible for a founder to understand and carve out in their own way? And that's something that I haven't formally put together, but I've been thinking through a lot of like, how can I build out a standard that becomes more accessible and widely known because it checks these core boxes and it's going to give more opportunity to more people.
And is that where this software platform that you're thinking on fits in, or how does that all connect?
Part of it in some way. I haven't fully hashed it out, but I'll let you know in a few years. I'm sure I'll have it figured out by then.
Sounds good. Well, excited to stay in touch with that. Kat, final words of wisdom, words of advice you would leave for our angel investor listeners.
Trusting your gut on the founder more than the business itself is always the better bet and the bigger bet, I would say, is because at that really early stage, the founder themselves are less replaceable because they are the business at that point. So if you're thinking about just indexing on their data room and their financials, I would highly encourage thinking about them and their qualities as a founder and their capabilities and what they're willing to sacrifice, because that is where the real founders make the difference in the shift and are going to do the most right by your money.
Kat, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining. I very much look forward to the book and all of your content. How can our listeners stay in touch with you? You have recently been investing in quite a bit of content. So how can we stay connected?
Yeah, I share a ton of founder insights advice. So if you're thinking about a deal or a founder's not just there yet for you and you want them to have a little extra insight or get some insights yourself, I'm very active on LinkedIn at Kat, K-A-T Weaver, W-E-A-V-E-R, and my new YouTube channel, as well as Instagram. It's all there. Like you said, I've been spending a ton of time there trying to figure it out and just not enough founders know about me yet. I do a ton of free trainings and I share them on all the social there for founders to get insights on pitching and or kind of a grants masterclass. It's all there. So whether it's for yourself or a future founder, I'd love to meet you there. Send me a DM. I open every single one of them. And I'm just here to make some founder lives better and make the investors happier too at the end of the day.
Fantastic. Kat, thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was a great conversation. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Diligent Observer. I'm your host, Andrew, and if you're an angel investor looking for essential angel intel in 5 minutes every week, I think you'd enjoy my newsletter. I send my best stuff, interesting deals, and more straight to your inbox so you never miss a thing. Subscribe today at thediligentobserver.com.